The expense of spirit and a waste of shame is lust in action. Until action, lust is perjured, murderous, bloody, full of blame, savage, extreme, rude, cruel, not to trust. Enjoyed no sooner, but despised straight, past reason hunted, and no sooner had, past reason hated, as a swallowed bait, on purpose laid to make the taker mad. Mad in pursuit and in possession, so had, having, and in quest to have extreme. A bliss in proof, and proved a very woe. Before a joy proposed, behind a dream. All this the world well knows, yet none knows well to shun the heaven that leads men to this hell. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another reading from William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. It is still spring in Minnesota, and that means cold and gray. But I'm okay. I'm fortified. As you can see here, my goodness, it's Guinness. Feel the strength flowing through me. If you recall from last time, we've got two major ideas going on here in this play. One is the idea of the scholastic debate, which is all about the nature of words and ideas and how ideas connect or don't connect to a reality beyond this world. The nominalists believe that we have words as constructs, but that they don't have an actual connection to anything beyond themselves. So we call a dog, or a hound, or a chien, or a canis, simply so that we can distinguish that creature, four legs, furry, chases a ball and barks. But there's no dogness beyond this world for the nominalist. The realist, on the other hand, holds that words have power and meaning in and of themselves, and that they conjure something from this other world which is like a form of spirituality or magic, if you will. And that the person who believes that words have power, words connect to a logos, words connect to a divine realm. The realist. They had great debate with the nominalists. The realist seeking a truth, a center, a source of all of our meaning, like a pilgrim going to Rome. And the nominalists seeking perhaps to get back at the mother, so to speak, that bore them. This debate seems to be incarnated in the play. Another thing that's incarnated in the play is like the sonnet that I just read, sonnet number 129, which is all about lust and unbridled lust. What does lust look like? And lust is different from love. You know, in the old examination of conscience that occurs in the St. Augustine prayer book, when you examine the deadly sins under lust, it's not just sexuality. There's also the idea of cruelty to animals and destruction of the physical world. And I've always found that kind of interesting, because lust is not about sexuality alone. It's really about dominance. It's about holding something else under your thumb. It's like enslaving the world to your will. That's lust. There's a great poem, if I remember right. It's by, I want to say W.H. Auden maybe. But it's called Playboy. And it's a great, great poem. It really embodies this idea of looking into the palantir, looking into the darkness, which is what lust is about. But as Shakespeare defines it, lust is perjured and murderous and bloody and full of blame and savage and extreme and rude and cruel and not to trust. And if we see those things in our characters, then we know for sure that he's making something of an incarnation of that idea as well. Now today I'm not going to go on at length about these ideas, nor will I go on at length about the Renaissance, and you can all breathe easier for that. I think we've established now that the Renaissance was definitely on the downside for Shakespeare, and that he was writing in a world that was seeing the tail end of the Renaissance, moving into the modern world. We could perhaps say with some strength that he was writing a poem, a play that embodied the idea of the scholastic debate, which was still around in Europe. And we can say with some confidence that he was embodying the same idea that Sonnet 129 embodies. And we move now into Act 2 of the play, if you're following along. Act 2 of the play begins with the prologue. That same prologue that began the play now shows up again. So you imagine some fellow comes on stage, Mr. Shakespeare or whoever was playing the prologue at the time, and he's going to tell us a sonnet. He's going to tell us something about how the play is progressing, but it's in sonnet form. And if you recall, the sonnet is 14 lines. An English sonnet is 14 lines. It's divided into 3 quatrains, that is 3 sets of 4 lines each, and then a couplet at the end, 2 lines. It rhymes A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, G, G. It's normally composed in iambic pentameter, which means 5 feet, pentameter, of unstressed, stressed feet, iambs. And today we're going to try and read both scene 1 and scene 2, because scene 1's so dinky, it's so short. Let's go right into scene 2. And scene 2 is one of the most famous scenes from Romeo and Juliet. It's what's referred to as the balcony scene. Although, oddly enough, there is no balcony in the scene. That actually seems to have been a later addition by the people of Verona, who created a balcony and then touted it as Juliet's balcony in order to draw tourists to the city. It worked. So let's just go ahead and read, and I'll look at what the chorus has to say. We'll talk about that after we've read that. But let's go ahead and read Act 2, the prologue, and the chorus. Enter chorus. Now old desire doth in his deathbed lie, and young affection gapes to be his heir. That fair for which love groaned for and would die, with tender Juliet matched, is now not fair. Now Romeo is beloved, and loves again, alike bewitched by the charm of looks, but to his foes supposed he must complain, and she steal love's sweet bait from fearful hooks. To breathe such, or being held a foe, he may not have access to breathe such vows as lovers use to swear. And she, as much in love, her means much less to meet her new beloved anywhere. But passion lends them power, time means to meet, tempering extremities with extreme sweet. There's a lot in that sonnet to unpack. I'm going to just touch on a few things. Notice that the very last, the couplet, but passion lends them power and time means to meet, tempering extremities with extremes sweet. Passion can also be lust. It's a similar word, right? So their lust lends them power, despite all of the hurdles that they have to overcome. And then time gives them the means to meet. But they're tempering extremities. And if you remember from Sonnet 129, right, he suggests that lust, that expensive spirit and waste of shame, has all those adjectives tied to it. One of them is extremity, being extreme. It is an extreme sort of desire. So much so that that it does extreme things, irrational things. It does things which are beyond rational thought. And that same term extreme is brought up even in the third quatrain there in the poem, where he says, mad in pursuit and in possession, so had, having, and in quest to have, extreme. So lust pushes a person to do extreme things. And the chorus here, the prologue here, even says that. They temper their extremities with another extremely sweet thing. In other words, the desire, the lust, the romance is just so sweet that all the other extremities are tempered by it, overcome by it, overshadowed by it, if you will. But Romeo himself, as it says in the second quatrain here, is beloved and loves again. So he's in that place where he's loved by someone, so he thinks, and he loves someone again, and so he no longer feels that emptiness, that loneliness that we talked about in the first part of the play. He fills up that loneliness with romance, which is a common human thing, I think, to think that another person is going to be the answer to your loneliness and your longing for some meaning. It's as though, I think it was Carmen Ratzinger who said there's this heart-shaped, this God-shaped hole in man, right? And that God-shaped hole in man can't be filled by any mortal thing. And that's sort of where Romeo is. He's got this hole in his heart, right? This emptiness, which desires to be filled with something. And right now, he's trying to fill that with the love of a young girl. And she steals love's sweet bait from fearful hooks. That's a really interesting line. To his foe supposed he must complain, and she steal love's sweet bait from fearful hooks. What are the fearful hooks that she's stealing from? And I wonder if that image of stealing love's sweet bait from fearful hooks, is that a reference to like a Dante image? The fearful hooks of the demons in hell? One way or the other, we certainly have the idea here that she is stealing love's sweet bait. That's an image that's directly out of Sonnet 129, right? That in Sonnet 129, it suggests that lust, essentially, is despised straight, past reason hunted, and no sooner had, past reason hated, as a swallowed bait. The idea of fishing for something with bait, right? Or catching something with a bait. That's sort of what we have here in the prologue of Act II. That the chorus is recognizing that something's afoot with this romance. And it's sweet, definitely. It's extremely sweet. I think the people that misread the poem as just nothing more than a romance see that sweetness and think about the sweetness that they've had in past romances, and they apply it to this. But what they miss is the extremity of that, and how that extremity overshadows the other extremities that are put in their way. Family problems and age problems and friendship problems and all that. Makes them ignore or deny the fact that perhaps this romance is star-crossed, shouldn't actually exist. Well, from the chorus, we move into Act 2, Scene 1, which is a lane by the wall of Capulet's orchard. And remember, this is right after the party, and Romeo has met Juliet for the first time, and that same night, as he's going home, in a mask with his friends, he escapes from his friends and goes over the wall, and boom, he's in the garden of Juliet, and there she is. What a coinkydink, right? That he just happened to end up in her backyard. Maybe it isn't a coincidence, and if we're reading this play for meaning, or if we're as a director thinking, what motive can we give to our actors? Maybe it isn't coincidence. He knew the city. He knew where Juliet's house was. How did he accidentally end up in her backyard? How do you accidentally end up in anyone's backyard? Well, when you're a young teenager in love, right? Why must I be a Romeo in love? When you're a young teenager in love, that's not accident. That's malice aforethought, I suppose you could say. He intended to be in her backyard. And one could read this next scene either as, wow, what a great accident that they happen upon each other, or you could read it as, he intended to get there. And she knew he was coming. In fact, it may be that we could read the scene that she knows he's there. I must give credit to the bard, though, because these next two scenes have some of the most beautiful poetry in them. In all, I think almost all of his corpus. These next two scenes contain a beautiful scene, and it is a beautiful love scene between two young people. There's no doubt about it. But as we read through it, bear in mind, it's not a love story, and Juliet may be trying to catch Romeo, to bait the trap and catch Romeo. And it may be, tragedy among tragedies, Romeo wants to be caught, because maybe that, he thinks, is the solution to his emptiness. Let's read forward. Act 2, Scene 1. A lane by the wall of Capulet's orchard. Enter Romeo alone. Can I go forward? When my heart is here, turn back, dull earth, and find thy center out. He climbs the wall and leaps down within it. Enter Benvolio and Mercutio. Romeo, my cousin Romeo, says Benvolio. Mercutio says, he is wise, and all my life hath stolen him home to bed. He ran this way, and he leapt this orchard wall. Call, good Mercutio. Nay, I'll conjure too. Romeo, humours, madman, passion, lover! Appear thou in the likeness of a sigh. Speak what one rhyme, and I'm satisfied. Cry, but harmony. Pronounce but love and dove. Speak to my gossip Venus one fell word, one nickname for her purblind son and heir. Young Adam Cupid, he that shot so trim when King Capithia loved the beggar maid. He heareth not, he stirreth not, he moveth not. The ape is dead, and I must conjure him. I conjure thee, by Rosalind's bright eyes, by her high forehead, and her scarlet lip, by her fine foot, straight leg, and quivering thigh, and the demesne that there adjacent lie, that in thy likeness thou appear to us. And if he hear thee, thou wilt anger him, says Benvolio. This cannot anger him. 'Twould anger him to raise a spirit in his mistress' circle of some strange nature, letting it there stand till she had laid it and conjured it down. That was some spite. My invocation is fair and honest, and in his mistress's name I conjure only but to raise him up. Come, says Benvolio, come, he hath hid himself among these trees, to be consorted with the humorous night. Blind is his love, and best befits the dark. If love be blind, love cannot hit the mark. Now will he sit under a medlar tree, and wish his mistress were that kind of fruit, as maids call medlars when they laugh alone. Oh, Romeo, that she were an open, etc., and thou a popper and pear. Romeo! Good night. I'll to my truckle bed. This field bed is too cold for me to sleep. Come, shall we go? Go then, for 'tis in vain to seek him here that means not to be found. Exeunt. Scene 2. Capulet's orchard. Enter Romeo. He jests at scars and never felt a wound. Juliet appears above, at a window. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who's already sick and pale with grief that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she. Be not her maid, since she is grievous and envious. Her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. It is my lady. Oh, it is my love. Oh, that she knew she were. She speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that? Her eye discourses, I will answer it. I am too bold. But it is not me she speaks, to me. Two of the fairest stars in all the heaven, having some business, do entreat her eyes to twinkle in their spheres till they return. What if her eyes were there, they in her head? The brightness of her cheek would shame those stars, as daylight doth a lamp. Her eyes in heaven would through the airy region stream so bright that birds would sing and think it were not night. See how she leans her cheek upon her hand. Oh, that I were a glove upon that hand, that I might touch that cheek. Juliet. Ay me. She speaks. Oh, speak again, bright angel, for thou art as glorious as this night, being over my head, as is a winged messenger of heaven under the white upturned wondering eyes of mortals that fall back to gaze on him when he bestrides the lazy pacing clouds and sails upon the bosom of the air. Oh, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Deny thy father, and refuse thy name, or if thou wilt not, be but sworn my love, and I'll no longer be a Capulet. Shall I hear more? Or shall I speak at this? 'Tis but thy name that is my enemy. Thou art thyself not a Montague. What's Montague? It is not hand, nor foot, nor arm, nor face, nor any other part belonging to a man. Oh, be some other name. What's in a name? That which we call a rose, by any other name, would smell as sweet. So Romeo would, were he not Romeo called. Retain that dear perfection which he owes, without that title. Romeo, doff thy name, and for thy name, which is no part of thee, take all myself. I take thee at thy word. Call me but love, and I'll be new baptized. Henceforth I never will be Romeo. What man art thou, that thus bescreened in night, so stumblest on my counsel? By a name I know not how to tell thee who I am. My name, dear saint, is hateful to myself, because it is an enemy to thee. Had I it written, I would tear the word. My ears have not yet drunk 100 words of thy tongue's uttering, yet I know the sound. Art thou not Romeo, and a Montague? Neither, fair maid, if either thee dislike. How camest thou hither? Tell me, and wherefore? The orchard walls are high and hard to climb, and the place death, considering who thou art, if any of my kinsmen find thee here. With love's light wings did I o'erperch these walls, for stony limits cannot hold love out, and what love can do, that dares love attempt. Therefore thy kinsmen are no let to me. If they do see thee, they will murder thee. Alack, there lies more peril in thine eye than 20 of their swords. Look thou but sweet, and I am proof against their enmity. I would not, for the world, they saw thee here. I have night's cloak, to hide me from their eyes. But thou love me, let them find me here. My life were better ended by their hate, than death prorogued, wanting of thy love. By whose direction foundst thou out this place? By love, that first did prompt me to inquire. He lent me counsel, and I lent him eyes. I am no pilot, yet wert thou as far as that vast shore washed with the farthest sea, I would adventure for such merchandise. Thou knowest the mask of night is on my face, else would have made him blush, but paint my cheek. For that which thou hast heard me speak tonight, fain would I dwell on form. Fain deny what I have spoke, but farewell compliment. Dost thou love me? I know thou wilt say aye, and I would take thy word. Yet if thou swearest, thou may prove false. At lovers' poetries they say Jove laughs. Oh, gentle Romeo, if thou dost love, pronounce it faithfully, or if thou thinkest I am too quickly won, frown and be perverse. say thee nay, so thou wilt woo. But else, not for the world. In truth, fair Montague, I am too fond, and therefore thou mayst think my behaviour light. But trust me, gentlemen, I'll prove more true than those that have more cunning to be strange. I should have been more strange, I must confess, but that thou overheardst, ere I was ware, my true love's passion. Therefore pardon me, and not impute this yielding delight, love, which the dark night hath so discovered. Lady, by yonder moon I swear, that tips with silver all these fruit tree tops. Oh, swear not by the moon, the inconstant moon, that monthly changes in her circled orb, lest that thy love prove likewise variable. What shall I swear by? Do not swear at all. Or, if thou wilt, swear by thy gracious self, which is the God of my idolatry, and I'll believe thee. If my heart's dear love, well, do not swear. Although I joy in thee, I have no joy of this contract tonight. It is too rash, too unadvised, and too sudden, too like the lightning, which doth cease to be ere one can say it lightens. Sweet, good night. This bud of love by summer's ripening breath may prove a beauteous flower when next we meet. Good night, good night. As sweet repose and rest come to thy heart as that within my breast. Oh, wilt thou leave me so unsatisfied? What satisfaction canst thou have tonight? The exchange of thy love's faithful vow for mine. I gave thee mine before thou didst request it, and yet I would it were to give again. Wouldst thou withdraw it? For what purpose, love? But to be frank, and give it thee again, and yet I wish, but for the thing I have. My bounty is as boundless as the sea. My love is deep. The more I give to thee, the more I have, for both are infinite. I hear some noise within. Dear love, adieu. Anon, good nurse. Sweet Montague, be true. Stay but a little. I will come again. Oh, blessed, blessed night. I am afeard, being in night, all this is but a dream. Too flattering, sweet to be substantial. Re-enter Juliet above. 3 words, dear Romeo, and good night indeed. If that thy bent of love be honourable, thy purpose marriage, send me word tomorrow, by one that I'll procure to come to thee. Where, at what time thou wilt perform the rite, and all my fortunes at thy foot I'll lay, and follow thee, my lord, throughout the world. Madam, says the nurse, I come, anon. But if thou meanst not well, I do beseech thee, Madam, by and by, I come, to cease thy suit, and leave me to my grief. Tomorrow will I send. So thrive my soul. 1,000 times good night. 1,000 times the worst doesn't want thy light. Oh, love goes toward love, as schoolboys from their books, but love from love toward school with heavy looks. Re-enter Juliet above. Hist, 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 Romeo, hist. Oh, for a falconer's voice to lure this tasseled gentle back again. Bondage is hoarse, and may not speak aloud, else would I tear the cave where echo lies, and make her airy tongue more hoarse than mine, with repetition of my Romeo's name. Romeo! Ah, it is my love that calls upon my name. How silver sweet sound lovers' tongues by night, like softest music to attending ears. Romeo, my dear, at What o'clock tomorrow shall I send to thee? What, the hour of 9? I will not fail. 'Tis 20 years till then. I forgot why I did call thee back. Let me stand here till thou rememberest. I shall forget to have thee still stand there, remembering how I love thy company. But I'll stay, to have thee still forget, forgetting any other home but this. 'Tis almost morning. I would have thee gone, and yet no farther than a wanton's bird, who lets it hop a little from her hand, like a poor prisoner in his twisted gyves, and with a silk thread plucks it back again, so loving jealous of his liberty. I would I were that bird. Sweet, so would I, yet I should kill thee with much cherishing. Good night, good night. Parting is such sweet sorrow, that I shall say good night till it be morrow. Exit. Sleep, dwell upon thine eyes. Peace in thy breast. Would I were sleep, and peace so sweet to rest. Hence will I to my ghostly father's cell, his help to crave, and my dear hap to tell. Exit. It's a beautiful scene. I mean, it's an amazingly well-crafted scene, full of imagery and romance and teenage zest for one another. And who could not help but read that scene and fall in love with the characters and say, this is a great romance. What a good romance. What a beautiful romance. Now to pick it apart. If we look through the text, notice the bird imagery throughout. Romeo says, I went over the wall with wings, right? That he speaks of himself as he was winged by love. And she herself says to him in response, right, that, where is it? Here it is. With love's light wings did I o'erperch these walls, for stony limits cannot hold out love, right? And she says that I would not have my kinsmen see thee, they'd murder you. But then later on, she talks about how he, to her, is like a wanton's bird, a child's little bird on a string. Remember, we talked about that earlier, that children would, for one of their entertainments, have a bird, and the bird would be tied to a string, and the child would throw the bird in the air and drag it back, and it'd be really cute until the bird died, you know. And she even says, I am afraid that I might I kill you, right, with loving jealousy. So I would crush you with much cherishing. But he says, I were thy bird. I would like that, to gravitate towards you. And that he says, I would like to be as though I were enslaved to you. Notice that she also brings up that same imagery. Did you notice the line where she says, you are the god of my idolatry? What's idolatry? She says that you are the god of my idolatry. And that's the worship of something other than God himself, as though it were a god. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Notice that he suggests early on, when he's soliloquizing back here, that she is like the sun, that she is like the stars. She's not like the moon, she's like the sun, which is a lovely image. Only it's an ill trope. It takes a time-honored image, which is that women are associated with the moon, men associated with the sun, and it flips it, changes it. So now Juliet is associated with the sun, and what basically it gravitates towards the sun. Well, the earth and the moon. You could say that the moon then is subordinated to the sun, at least in the solar vision, if you will, of Shakespeare's time. And here we have Juliet being the sun, and Romeo subordinated to her, making himself her slave. even though she says, you are the god of my idolatry. Notice also that early on, he is suggesting that she is more brilliant than the sun, she's more beautiful than the sun, and he wished he was a glove upon that hand, that I might touch that cheek. It's a beautiful image, right? But of course, if he were a glove upon that hand, he would be flayed, he'd be dead, he'd be leather, right? He'd already be a dead thing. So subordinated to her, I suppose you could say. So there's a lot in here that we could say is not really good imagery. And when she says in her little soliloquy here, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? That is, why are you Romeo? And she says, deny your father, refuse your name. Who's his father? Well, it is Lord Montague, it's true. But it's also, you could read it as father as in the Lord himself. Deny the Lord. That's a possibility, especially if Romeo is pilgrim to Rome, right? So there is that connotation with that line. And she says, well, if you won't do that, then I'll just get rid of my name, Capulet, right? And she then goes on to say, well, what is a Montague, right? It is neither the hand, nor the foot, nor the arm, nor the face, nor any other part belonging to a man. Romeo Montague is not in him. It's just a label. It's just a term. It's just a construct that we use in order to distinguish your people from my people. Nominalism, right? Notice also that she says, that which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. That's true. We could call it dumb fries, we could call it skunk teriyaki. It would still smell as though it were a rose. It would still have thorns. The word itself doesn't necessarily attach directly to the thing, right? Nominalism. And then she says, Romeo, doff thy name, Romeo. Stop being a pilgrim. Stop searching for meaning. Stop going to Rome. And in exchange, right, you get me. You get Juliet. Yay. If Juliet is the embodiment of Julius, which is a form of Jupiter, which is a form of Zeus, then what is being suggested to a certain degree, or what's being suggested here, is that in exchange for finding meaning in that pilgrimage to Rome, you get this pagan thing, this pagan god. Now, back up for a minute. Does Shakespeare intend that directly? Hard to say, but it's implied in the text. It's implied. It's part of the possible read of the text. Essentially, he's saying, if you get rid of your name, Romeo, you get me, the young 13-year-old Juliet. And we can certainly say that is that a worthy exchange? Is that something which is really worthwhile? Is Juliet such a great catch? Well, Romeo certainly thinks so, doesn't he? She goes on to suggest that his wanting to hook up with her that night, for lack of a better word, is too rash and too unadvised, too sudden and too like the lightning, right? Too sudden, too rash. Does that remind you of Sonnet 129? Is there a line in 129 about rashness and impetuosity? And she says, I don't want that impetuosity. What does she want instead? She wants him to get married to her. She doesn't want this one-night stand thing. She wants for him to make her his wife. And then all of her treasures, Lord Capulet's treasures, she will lay at the feet of Romeo. Sounds like a square deal if we're thinking, let's get these two houses together. But is it really hers to give away? And why would she be so eager to give it away? And is it possible that she's using his lust, his desire for her, his wanting that one-night stand? Is it possible that she's using that? Could she be using it as part of a plan that maybe she's worked out already? Could she be, playing him? Maybe I'm too cynical. But maybe Shakespeare is suggesting that her whole speech here is a very well calculated little ploy to get Romeo into her snare. like a fowler gets a bird into the snare or drags the bird back on a string. Notice the line that she says here, and I've heard this interpreted as something which is in praise of Juliet, or in praise of women, or in praise of the sexual power of women. Notice what she says here: to be frank, I would give it to thee again, and yet I wish but for the thing I have. My bounty is as boundless as the sea, my love as deep. The more I give to thee, the more I have, for both are infinite. That is, her love and her bounty are infinite. Now we could say, wow, what a great praise of women, great praise of young Juliet. It's true. But what has Romeo been seeking up to this point? He's been seeking something that can fill that God-shaped hole. He's been seeking something that can fill that emptiness and loneliness. And then, bing! Along comes Juliet, and she says, I have this infinite bounty and this infinite love that can just keep giving and giving and giving. What a coincidence. The answer to his prayers. Isn't that marvelous? Isn't it marvelous that he just happens to have found her right when he needed her most? Either we can read it as, and I don't read it this way, either we can read it as, it's a beautiful thing, and Romeo and Juliet are meant for one another, and darn, their families are just out to get them. Or we can read it as a very unfortunate star-crossed event, which was foreshadowed by Romeo's trepidation at going to the party, as though he were flying into a trap. Maybe. Notice at the end of it, she says, good night, and he says, I will go to my ghostly father's cell, his help to crave and my dear hap to tell. In other words, I'm going to the priests, because normally you'd have like one confessor that you went to confession regularly and told things. He guided you in life. So I'm going to go to this guy, my ghostly father's cell, and I'm going to seek his help in getting married to Juliet, and I'm going to tell him how happy I am. Which sounds lovely. Why does Shakespeare choose the word ghostly father's cell, I wonder? It's an old Anglo-Saxon word, geistlich, in German, and ghostly means the spirit, the man who guided your spirit. Up to now we haven't seen this fella, but he must be having his hands full with Romeo, because certainly this is a brooding young guy, and Romeo is going to go to him to seek his help in getting married to this girl Juliet right after he's broken off with Rosalind. So you can imagine how that will be received. But we'll see the character of Friar Lawrence in the next scene and see how he receives Romeo's hap at that point. Here's a quick shout out again to Patrick Stewart, who's reading the sonnets. If you get a chance to catch his Facebook page, I think maybe up on his website, on YouTube, see what he's doing. It's really beautiful to see what he's doing. He's reading all the sonnets by Shakespeare, so I would strongly encourage you to check that out. I would also suggest that you check out, if you can, Kevin Stroud's History of the English Language. It's a marvelous podcast. Highly recommended. Also, if you are interested in Shakespeare, go and check out the Shakespeare 2020 project by Ian Deschers. So a plug for that as well. And finally, a plug for myself. If you appreciate what I'm doing, check out my Patreon page. Become one of my patrons. You can be a patron, and be a patron of my arts. I certainly would appreciate it. Any amount would be great. My family would certainly appreciate it as well in these very interesting times. Otherwise, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining me this afternoon. And until we meet next time, stay safe, stay healthy. God bless you all. Cheers.